Hello and welcome to the Daily Fantasy 5 podcast, where we bring you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. Today is Monday, August 19th. This is episode 179, and we brought to you, as always, by mathradio.com. We can pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99 to help your kids, ages 7 through 17, get better grades, score higher on exams, and even get into college. So, dads out there listening to the show, be the hero of the household by helping your child with math class. This will help them with homework. I know you and mom don't want to do homework with your kids because, face it, math homework is hard. Let us help you out over at mathradio.com. Go to mathradio.com. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. What do you have to lose? And the cost is less than a nice pizza at $9.99 per math class. Go to www.mathradio.com. All right, welcome to the show. Today we have a lot of things to talk about. We have a bunch of baseball stories. We have some NFL injuries. And then we're going to preview the Houston Texans in the show as the NFL extravaganza countdown continues today. First, let's start with baseball. Craig Kimbrel has been activated for the Cubs, so their closer could be back as early as today. So if you want to start him in your fantasy lineups, go ahead and do that as well. Max Scherzer is back for the Nationals. Let me rephrase. He's back on the team. He should be making his regular start on Thursday. Now, he's been out for a while. I don't know if you want to use him in a daily fantasy format, but if he's on your regular team, you might want to get him back in the lineup, as Scherzer is incredible. The Indians starting pitcher, however, not as good news there. Kluber is trying to make a return to the big leagues. He suffered a setback in his rehab start yesterday with an ab injury. Let's move away from baseball and hit the big ones in football. DK Metcalf is going to have some kind of knee surgery. The report I saw was unclear on what type exactly of surgery it's going to be and how long he will be out. I think this is great news for David Moore. He will be the clear number 2 wide receiver in Seattle. I think he is primed for a big year. You know, I've liked him for a long time, and I own him in probably 75% of my best ball leagues. So I think this is really good news for me as a DK Metcalf owner. If you want to, please go ahead and pick him up. He's going as pick 165 or something crazy like that. So in standard leagues, he's not even being chosen. But go ahead and take DK Metcalf as your last wide receiver, and you will not be upset. Finally, let's talk briefly about Antonio Brown. So yesterday they said he was going to be back, and then he was going to sit out forever. Their GM came out and was like, he either needs to be all in or all out. So I don't know. Maybe Antonio Brown just doesn't want to be on the Raiders. I'm not sure what's going on with AB, but he was back in practice again today. That report came out 40 minutes ago. So Antonio Brown back at practice. I'm glad this show came out late. Before I read that news, I was super frustrated and didn't know exactly what to say about Antonio Brown. Hopefully everything will be fine and he will just keep playing and we don't have to hear from him any longer. All right, that is the news from the world of fantasy sports. Now let's talk about your Houston Texans. So my first big question is, how did the Texans win 11 games last year? All right, listen to these stats. This team ranked, 21st overall in defense, according to DVOA. And 21st on offense in DVOA, and then 7th in defense, right? That should put them around what? Maybe 9 wins. They should be middle of the pack, certainly not 11. Their expected win totals, according to the numbers, was 10. I even think that's a little bit high. In order for this team to maintain that success, they're going to need to be much more efficient on offense. 21st ranked offenses typically do not lead to wins unless you're the Chicago Bears and you have a number 1 ranked defense. I believe there's honestly a huge difference between the number 7 defense and the number 1 defense. If you really want to be elite on defense and make a difference, you really need to be top 5. And I don't see how this defense makes the next step. So let's, before we transition to the defense, let me just go over a couple teams they beat last year. So 8 of their wins that they got last year came from games against these teams. They played the Bills. They played Jacksonville twice. Okay. They beat the Dolphins. They beat the Redskins. They beat the Broncos. They beat the Browns. And they beat the Jets. All of those teams stink, right? So half of the teams they played last year stunk, and they collected 8 wins right there. Their schedule this year is much, much, much more difficult. I don't think, we'll get to the predictions here at the end of the show, but it's certainly not going to be a cakewalk like it was last year. Now let's transition to this defense that I do not think has the tools they need to make the jump into the elite kind of defenses in the top 5. So the defense performed well last year. There's going to be major changes in the secondary. Mathieu and Jackson both left town, and they were replaced by Gibson and Roby. yeah, that's not a good trade-off. It seems like Clowney's going to be back. I can't recall if he's playing on the franchise tag or if he got a new deal, but either way, he should be on the team this year. And then Watt, if he stays healthy, sure, the defense should be good. But I mean, there's certainly no guarantee that Clowney and Watt are going to be healthy all year. That seems like a a fool's gold right there. So I don't think the defense can even maintain the number 7 ranking. Nonetheless, jumping up to number 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. Yeah, I would much more expect them to be middle of the pack, somewhere between 10 and say 18, something like that. That makes a lot more sense to me from this defensive group. All right, question number 3. Will the offensive line destroy this team? Well, it certainly seems possible. So the offensive line is certainly a mess in Houston. They rank 23rd and might be worse this year. So 23rd ranked offensive line, I don't know. It's pretty terrible. It seemed like Watson was always on his back last year. And I worry for the health of him. I mean, last year he was able to play in all 16 games, but I think his ribs were so beat up at one point that he couldn't even fly with the team. He had to take a bus or some nonsense. I don't know what's going on with that. I hear he's cleared again to fly this year, but I can't imagine that he's going to be able to survive another year behind that offensive line. They went and drafted an offensive lineman in the first round. I believe they've already had a couple injuries on the offensive line in training camp. So the offensive line is going to be thin again. I just don't think they're built to protect Deshaun Watson. And I think that's going to be a big problem for this offense. And one of the major reasons that, sure, I think they might take a jump from number 23. It's not hard to jump up when you're the 23rd ranked offense. But I think this offensive line prevents them from being a top 10 team and therefore prevents the Texans from being a real contender. Okay, let's move on to the fantasy point of view. Here, let's see. The fantasy options are fairly obvious. Watson is either ranked first or second on most people's boards, and Hopkins also either first or second. Well, second, pretty much everyone's board. I mean, maybe you have Rodgers, but Hopkins is a top 5 guy, as is Watson. They're both fantastic. So, both very, very good players, but I mean, obviously not a lot of value there. They're both being drafted very, very high. But of course, I'd like to have both guys on my team. I'm certainly a lot lower on Watson than most people are. I just don't think he can survive the season. So I would not be drafting Watson as my number 2 quarterback. Well, I'd take him as my second quarterback. I would not be drafting him at where he's going in ADP as QB number 2. Let's see. What else do we have from a fantasy perspective? Lamar Miller, he's a nice option. He's going at RB 30. He seems perfectly legit to, get about 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is fine for your flex running back, your RB3. I'm perfectly happy to have that. He should perform at least to his ADP of RB30. Wide receivers outside of Hopkins, I don't love Fuller at 33. I think he is I don't know. It's going to be his 4th year. He didn't really take the jump. He only played 7 games last year. His health is still a little bit questionable right now. I don't think I'd take the gamble on him at that point. Maybe if he fell a bit, I'd be more willing to gamble on him. I don't mind taking Kuti at 47th, though, ADP among wide receivers. He's going to be a second-year player. He didn't play much last year. I think he has the upside to really make strides this year next to Hopkins. Hopkins should get all of the double teams. And, Fuller and Kuti should get, plenty of room to work. So he could develop a lot as a second-year wide receiver. So I don't mind that pick at all. Moving on to the Vegas over-unders. Vegas has this team at 8.5 wins this year. I still had them winning 9 games. It feels high to me now that I'm talking about them. But I went through the whole list and I ended up with 9 wins. So I'm going to stay there. I'm certainly not going to wager on the Texans over. Only a half a game does not make, for a big jump on my books. So I will not be wagering either way on the Texans. I feel like they're a 8, 9, 10-win team, somewhere in there. Probably 9 is the right feel for me, but I would not be surprised if they won 8 games, 9 games, 10 games. It feels like they're going to be a middle-of-the-pack team, but I also worry that, like I said, quarterback Watson can get injured this year, and that would derail the entire season. So I'd be worried about that. That's one reason I don't like the over, even though I picked them for 9 wins. Okay, that is it for the show today. We'll be back tomorrow doing the same thing, bringing you the 5 things you need to know in the world of fantasy sports, and we'll be covering another AFC South team tomorrow on the NFL Countdown Extravaganza. Please, if you're watching the show on YouTube, hit that red subscribe button. Tell a friend about us. We'd greatly appreciate it. If you're listening to the show on a podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. and a 5-star rating, and a nice written review. And please visit www.mathradio.com. We will see you tomorrow. Bye for now.